Aloha and welcome back to Wanderous. I am your host, Andrew Crusoe, and today we're going to go back to Nepal. That's right, we're going back to Nepal, and we're going back for the International Mountain Festival. This is an episode dedicated to the International Mountain Festival. I was there for the 7th International Mountain Festival in honor of International Mountain Day. International. I'm saying the word international a lot. It is the 7th annual mountain festival held in the west side of Pokhara, and it's a riot. It's a riot. It's great. It's creative. It's great. Come along with me. Let's go explore it. Now, before we dive into the mountain festival, the 7th annual mountain festival held on the occasion of International Mountain Day at the International Mountain Museum, by the way, in a district called Rato Pairo, west side of Pokhara, the second largest town in the gorgeous nation of Nepal. Before we get to that, and we're going to get to that in a second, I want to frame that situation a bit with what was happening, because the photos that accompany this episode that supporters get actually cover almost a month, and that's because it covers mid-November to mid-December. Because I was in the thick of it, ladies and gentlemen. I was in the thick of it, writing technically my 4th novel and 7th book overall, and I was writing. This is about 95% of the days of November. Maybe 95% of the hours, too. I don't know. 95% of the hours between 10 p.m. and midnight. And I was writing a book that would turn into and become and transform into The Kaleidoscopic Universe, which is a book that I'm really, really proud of. That if you're listening to this, it may or may not be out. This is an evergreen show. But if you're listening to this and on its publishing date, it's not out yet. But it will be. And it's the best thing I've ever written. So I was really, really deep into that. I felt so supported by Pokhara. And I've talked about how the climate is fantastic, especially in October and November. It's a little burr in January, as I will cover a little later. But I wanted to kind of cover some smaller little stories, because I don't have a lot of photos of certain little stories, so I'm just going to touch on some things. Around this time, I moved to a different spot, a different room, which was great. I got the corner room, and I have this... I'm very nostalgic looking at these photos, to be honest, because the afternoon light is coming in, and they have these funny, thinner mattresses, and everything is just... They've got a map of Nepal on the wall of almost every single room in Banana Garden, where I stayed. And I don't know, it's very, it reminds me of just how rarefied the air is up there. It really is. Around this time, I also discovered a rainbow pier, which you can find if you walk along the edge of Feva Lake, which I highly recommend you do. You will see many places where there are these blue, mostly blue, but blue and red painted canoes. These boats. And if you keep going, you should just wander so much. Just wander around. It's very safe. If you wander, you'll get to a pier that has all these colored... I never quite figured out exactly what... I think they are lampshades in a rainbow pattern. And I walked there one afternoon, in the late afternoon, when the sun was setting the clouds on fire practically. And for some reason, I never figured out why... There was a person in a panda suit, and I have a video of this, which I'll put in the show notes for this episode. It's pretty funny. I don't really know what was going on. Sometimes when you're, I featured it. I featured a clip of this in one of my TikTok videos as well, which is also on Instagram, of this guy dressed in a panda suit on the pier. I don't know what was going on. But I also believe I have a YouTube short of this that I posted a couple years ago. And it's just a funny situation. There's a lot of quirky things going on in Pokhara. I mean, I think I've mentioned the fake. Yeah, I think it's fair to call it fake because Donald Duck doesn't look quite right. The unlicensed, very much unlicensed, and very well known Pokhara Disneyland, which is right on the edge of the lake, which is cute. You know, they've got bumper cars. They've got one of those ship rides that swings back and forth. It's fun. And they even have a little roller coaster. So, you know, that's there. But I was doing my best to balance this. And one of the ways I was balancing my writing was trying to go to events like the Mountain Festival. I should mention that if you support the show at $10 per month, which is not a lot of money anymore because of inflation, you get, this week, you're going to get 30 really lovely, hauntingly beautiful perspectives, shots of Fava Lake at night, these orange clouds hovering over the peaceful lake. You see this haunting ambiance, the silhouettes, the spiky silhouettes of palm trees. Very funny signage as well. There's a sign here. I didn't go to this. I wish I had. This sign, cardboard sign on the street. Had to take a photo of this. It says, the sign starts out, it's a vertical sign. It says, it's a sign, all caps. Come and feel your authentic intuition through movement. Movement is spelled with one E. Speech about our 7 bodies and how to be the main character of your movie. Yeah. Plus ecstatic dance, baby. At the Vegan Way, 17th of November, 2 p.m. on donation. So that's one of the cultures that is represented. So it's a lovely, and around this time I was really starting to get close with a guy named Volodymyr, which was one of the bright points for me. We just had these lovely conversations, and one of the conversations we had is recorded. I asked him if he wanted to be on my old show, and I think what I'm going to do, especially since I have a rather busy month, I'm going to post that interview, which is a wild story about his life and how he got deported from Bali. Yeah. Pro tip, don't break the law. But he's quite a storyteller and a really interesting guy. Him and his girlfriend were there to do trekking, I believe they did all the way up to Annapurna Base Camp. I might be misremembering that. But they did a longer trek, and he was very passionate about the drones. And he invited me to this gathering one night, which I have one photo of just to protect the identity of people, where they had dumplings, and there was a whole group of people. We had a little potluck type thing, and it was so nice. I mean, there was just these lovely little moments. And, but life's ups and downs. I didn't talk about the food poisoning. 2 episodes ago, I could have talked about the food poisoning I got. I could have talked about, maybe I mentioned it in passing, but he actually ended up giving me charcoal pills, which is a good thing to have. They also gave me water purification tablets that I still have to this day that I haven't had to use. So health problems will happen. I mean, I even got athlete's foot, which is not a thing I'm proud of, but that can happen. It was odd though, because it must have came on. I don't even know. I don't know what was going on because I had my own room, So this is something that is a risk when you travel, and it wasn't a big deal. I just got some tablets for it, and it was psych. It actually was a big deal. It actually ended up being a big problem, which we'll get to because it got under my toenail, and I won't describe it. I won't get super into it. But I will need to touch on it because it is part of my journey, and it's part of the reason why the end of my time in Nepal played out the way that it did. But that is not the episode we're talking about today. The episode we're talking about today is all about the Mountain Festival. Now, I had been enjoying and absorbing these amazing views. I actually went and I actually have some wonderful shots of just downtown Pokhara Annapurna Range just looming. Was really able to bring out some beautiful details editing these raw photos that I shot. Just looming, and I you just can't take your eyes off them, you know? You just can't take your eyes off of them. So the International Mountain Festival is kind of an art festival / student event / craft fair / I don't know. But it was great. And I will just briefly touch on some of the highlights. First of all, there were incredible paintings. Paintings I didn't entirely understand. Paintings that were ephemeral and beautiful and haunting and had lotuses and were very colorful, not just of the mountains, but also the Nepali people, of course. There was a big stage set up where people were kind of talking about the mountain festival. And it's funny, in the photo, I didn't see this at the time, there's a sign behind the panel. You know, I got a panel of like 3 people, and there's a bunch of people watching. I didn't understand what they were saying, by the way, because it was all in Nepali, and I didn't know, you know. Reality check. I've been in Asia for about a month at this point. Your first time in Asia, first country in Asia. And they're all speaking in a language I don't understand on stage, but behind them is written all in English, and the sign behind them says, 7th Mountain Festival. How to double tourists in Pokhara within 3 years? ? There's a lot of crochet. I don't know why there was crochet. There's crochet. People crocheted fruits and hats. Very colorful hats. Very colorful hats. My favorite part, well, there was 2 favorite parts. My first favorite part was there was a student area where they actually handmade some kind of mache material that they had painted that was a scale representation of Annapurna Range. And they had actually labeled that's why I recommend, if you are in Nepal in December, really worth going to this. It's a free event. And they even had Sarenkot on this. I just noticed this for the first time just now. Oh my gosh. They had the Sarenkot, which is a whole episode about Sarenkot and how much I enjoyed going up that hill and seeing Annapurna. And you can see just how Sarenkot is a blip in the radar compared to Annapurna South at 7,200 meters. Annapurna 1 at 8,091. Whoa. Annapurna 2 at 7,937. I should probably keep this photo on my desktop and then go back and look at my panorama. Maybe I'll be able to figure some stuff out. Mardi Himal is lower on the scale here. It's sort of more in the foothills, but it's still way up there. It's 5,500 meters. And many people recommended that hike to me. Mardi Himal, people who are very fit can do it in 2 days. That was the one that I was planning on doing. Unfortunately, I didn't get to do that, which I'll talk more about that later. I'm not gonna build you up to something that's not gonna happen. Spoilers: I didn't do Mardi Himal, and I didn't do Annapurna Base Camp, and it's really regrettable why I didn't do it. But I did do some things that I'm very happy with, and we'll get to that too. So I'm just absorbing this 3D map that these guys have made. It's color coded. You know, all the colors go from yellow to green to brown to white based on the climate zone, of course. There was also an area where there was a geologic area where they were talking about the different types of minerals deposited. And I think I have a video of that as well that I'll put in the show notes. Show notes can always be found in the YouTube description, in your Apple Podcast app, in your app in general, if it's in the RSS feed. Or if you don't know what RSS is, it's on your Spotify. It's in the Spotify. You know, it's in there. It's in there. You'll find it. There was also, for some reason, a bunch of stones, small stones as big as your hand, that were painted with birds. And there were some pretty great birds. I will now read to you several of the great birds that all live in Nepal. I did get to see a couple when I would go to a national park later on. There's Indian wide-eye, which looks a lot like Japanese wide-eye. It's this green bird with a white circle around its eye. These paintings were they were so cute. Some of them were quite striking and quite accurate, I would say. Spiny babbler looks pretty great. Kind of looks like a toucan, as long as that's labeled correctly. And of course, they were selling these stones. And I was tempted, but I'm very stone averse. I'm stone averse when I'm traveling, and I'll tell you why. stones are heavy. And I already felt like I had 3 more kilos in my inventory than I wanted. 3 more kilos than I wanted. And I was traveling with... I only had 1 pair of pants at that time because I had left my jeans in Kathmandu. And I was actually... That was a whole separate story of how I ended up getting those jeans. Maybe we'll have time to talk about that later. And my second favorite thing, besides the student exhibits, was archery. You could do archery for something like 10 cents. And I have a photo of my I think pretty good archery shot here. I'm within the red area. I didn't hit the bullseye, but I don't know. I think I'm gonna give myself a B, a solid B, not an A minus. But I'm going to give myself a solid B for archery. Pretty good, considering I hadn't done archery in years. And there was archery. There were events. There were, things that kids could do. And there was also, you could also just enjoy the grounds as well. So not only was there food, it's just kind of strange, but there was archery. There were other events. And there was, because this was in the actual International Mountain Museum, which does have a ticket, but you can play around on the grounds for free, and they've basically recreated small versions of famous mountains. And I believe the one that I went up is Machu Picchu because it has this sort of double tip on the top. I could be wrong. Correct me in the comments kindly if you want to. But the funny thing was, I went up the wrong side. There's a specific side. You're supposed to start on the left. I started on the right, and I went up a very steep way, and it was much more difficult. And I went down the easy way, but it's pretty up there. And there's a photo of me standing that some people can enjoy in front of this. I believe this is like a plaster, but it was quite tall. It was like flipping 5-6 meters tall. It was the whole deal. They rebuilt a couple of these mountains right there. And there's a sign in front of it that says, please do not climb on top of this Manaslu model. Oh, it's Manaslu. I apologize. Manaslu is another large peak. If you climb avoiding the given notice, you yourself need to be fully responsible for any kind of accident occurred. Thus, we alert you to climb the model peak at your own risk. What an odd sign. It says, do not climb up this model, but if you do climb, you're fully responsible. And it's a weird thing to say because there's clearly steps. There's clearly a path. It was clearly designed. Do they mean don't try to climb to the peak? There's clearly a trail. Like this is explicitly designed. There's even an area with a handrail. Go figure. Of course, from that area, and it was a pretty cool plaza area. There was like a little moat around the museum for some reason. From that area, you could see Annapurna 2. And I zoomed in and I got a shot of that from the grounds there. And that photo turned out quite nice. I love photographing in the Annapurna range in the afternoon because it's in the right place where the sun just makes it turn all mango-y color. In that same area where they had made fake mountains, they also had created a memorial. And the memorial was made of brick, and it was mostly square, kind of like a little stupa. And it said, dedicated to the mountaineers who lost their lives. So many people by that memorial had made cairns, small stacks of rocks. The rocks getting smaller, higher they went. And it was very somber. It was a very somber area. But it was overall quite a celebratory day. I mean, people were enjoying their opportunity to be near the mountains. I think it reminded people how lucky they were. I also got very odd food. You will get odd food in Nepal. You should do it. You should get some of the odd food. I would avoid street food, but festival food you're probably okay because it has to be set up and taken down. And I think the mountain festival was only 3 days. This food was basically like, it was like wheat noodles with some funky spicy sauce with like random celery in it. It was pretty funny. And of course it was like $1. And I remember I sat and listened to people talking in Nepali and not knowing what was going on at all. In fact, around this time, I had mixed feelings about a lot of stuff because my visa was running out. I had about 3.5 weeks left. Somehow the time had just flown, mostly because I had just finished, actually, by this point, I believe, as I reached the mountain festival, I think I had just finished, or I was like 1 or 2 chapters away from finishing, which was kind of cool because it was right around the 10th anniversary of when my first book came out. So it was kind of poetic. The Truth Beyond the Sky came out in December of 2012 at that time. So yeah, I'm dating this a little bit, but I went back and I counted it, and I wrote the first draft of this new tropical sci-fi, meditation course, romance, thriller, adventure, smorgasbord extravaganza. Could be one way you could describe it. I'm not too worried about describing it perfectly because I know how to market myself, and I know that this book is going to find the people that are meant to read it. The book has a real energy to it. It has a real personality, and I almost feel like it's kind of like it's alive. It feels like it has a life of its own at this point. And I wrote that first draft. I want to say the first draft was about 85,000 words, 90,000 words, something like that. And I wrote it in 38 days. And I was really proud of myself for that. So I'll leave that here. This has been the International Mountain Festival at the International Mountain Museum, which I highly recommend. I highly recommend the Mountain Museum. I highly recommend Feva Lake. I highly recommend Tallies. I also, I'll leave you with the recommendation. Speaking of Annapurna, and I have a photo of this dish for the supporters as well, because it was so addictive for some reason. There's a place that I recommend you check out, and it is a local place. The food is healthy and clean and delicious and incredibly cheap. And it's a place called Annapurna Bhanchha. Now, Bhanchha, Newport. No. Bhanchha means kitchen. So literally the place is called Annapurna Kitchen. Annapurna Bhanchha is a little bit south of the main drag, kind of on the south end of Lakeview area, right? It's still very close to Feva Lake. You'll find, if you ask around, but it's like 1 block off from the main road. If you look for Annapurna restaurant, you got to look for Bhanchha. I would go there and I would spend 90 cents, and they give you dal bhat, which doesn't sound fancy because dal bhat is lentils and rice. But then they give you some spicy stuff. Like you get spinach, you get delicious, I don't even know how to describe it. You just get delicious potato, and you get achar, and you get a crispy cookie thing, and you get hot sauce, which you don't have to have. You can avoid the heat, by the way, if you don't like the heat. But I had this whole process, you guys. I had this whole process where I would take the little bowl of dal bhat, because it's in a broth, and it's all veg. I don't even think there's ghee, I asked them. And I pour the dal bhat over the white rice, right? And because I just like mixing it. And then I would put bits of the vegetable in with that, and I would make this what I would now call nasi campur, because here in Bali, that just means campur means to mix, to champur something. And it's basically like a mixed rice, veg, whole thing. But what's really cool about dal bhat is it's a complete protein. You're getting like all the protein you need from the combination of lentils, which are extremely healthy and extremely good for your gut. They've shown that it reduces risk of things like colon cancer. You know, so when you come to Asia, it is wise to give oneself a few weeks to let your palate adjust, especially if you're coming from. I'm going to throw my home country under the bus because a lot of the food there is not made with health in mind. It's getting better, but in the United States, so much food is oversalted or oversugared, or they put corn syrup in it. And what happens when you have food like that a lot is it actually changes your baseline. It changes your tongue sensitivity, and you're less sensitive than you were when you were a kid. It dulls your senses in some way if you're always hitting it over the head with. It's like living in a discotheque. Like after a while, your sense of hearing is probably not going to be very good if you're living in an EDM club, right? If you're always bombarding your tongue with hyper sweet and hyper salty, it's going to naturally get a bit fatigued. So if you go to a place where the food is less processed, and it really is, like this stuff is cooked fresh, the rice is grown like a kilometer away, it's going to probably be strange to you at first. I mean, you're on the other side of the planet if you're coming from the West. But if you give yourself some time, I've seen magical things happen. And you start to notice nuance, and you start to appreciate food that isn't going to give you diabetes. So anyway, I don't want to rant too much about food because I feel like I used to do that too much. But I'm passionate about food, and we've seen from the science that food is the most efficient route to health. It is such a major impact on how well your body works. So it's good to be mindful of what we put inside of our bodies, you know. Thank you so much for coming with me to Nepal. We still have a few more adventures left in Nepal. And if you do go to Nepal and you listen to this, please leave a comment and tell me what I missed. Tell me what you enjoyed. Tell me if you had any similar circumstances or experiences. I love to hear about people's experience in Nepal. We've got a really big adventure coming up to Chitwan National Park. I'm really excited to talk about that soon. But I'm going to listen to this interview that I mentioned earlier in this episode with Volodymyr, who was quite an interesting character. Pretty thoughtful guy, I would say. Pretty cool person. Although I didn't get to know him extremely well because he was only there for a couple weeks. So, you know, you get to know somebody to a certain extent, and then they go. All these fleeting experiences. My name is Andrew Crusoe, and I appreciate you listening. If you do want to support this show, you can go to Patreon, patreon.com/hello, the word hello, Crusoe, Crusoe, like Robinson Crusoe. I almost forgot to mention this. It's important that I mention where you can go to support the show, because the financial support that I get keeps this show going. It really, really does. This show takes time and energy to make, and I really appreciate the people. There are some people that have been supporting this show since it started, and there have been people that's been supporting my Patreon for over 7 years now, and you know who you are. And I really appreciate your support, and I really enjoy sharing these behind-the-scenes glimpses with you guys. Also, if you're listening to this on YouTube, please subscribe. It's a free thing you can do for a creative guy like me, and it really means a lot to me. And then you can make sure that you won't miss any of the crazy stuff I have coming up. I put a lot of stuff on YouTube, not just this show either. I do shorts quite often, and I'm going to do some longer, eventually, Going to do some longer 4K. I'm starting to get vaguely obsessed with HDR video, which is high dynamic range, but that's another podcast. And until next time, go to somewhere new today. Go outside your comfort zone. This is your sign. If you were waiting for a sign, this is your sign. Go! Go now! Go now! Aloha.